That's a Steinway.
Yeah.
Is it a Steinway? We got double grand piano. I forgot about that grand piano. I don't even want to know what's in those cabinets over there. It's a which? Sorry. Which one's this one? What do you know these pianos? Or did somebody open these pianos? Which one's this? Do we have any piano experts?
That's a CF,
It's a CF. What's concert full?
which is a Yamaha.
9? Is that a 9?
That's a 9.
This
And
is,
then
There's a new
yeah,
German
this
Steinway.
is,
German
this is a
Steinway?
CF. If you lift the,
I don't
fall
know.
Yeah, it's a
bar,
Yamaha CF.
It's a CF. Concert full. Is that the CF?
Yes.
and that'll probably be a
That's a Steinway.
Steinway, yeah.
Oh, those crazy pianos. I love that stuff. Well, we have a student here who did a presentation. I think Jeff has arranged this. Joshua Winfield. Hey, cheers. Originally from New York City, Joshua is currently a second-year master's student in the music, technology, and digital media program here. Okay, and is Jeff like your instructor? Is he your teacher, or he's one of your professors?
Yes.
Or, okay, excellent. So extra marks for being here. He is a co-founder and owner of Continuous Motion Productions, LLC, a production company based in the United States. Joshua enjoys working with other artists and utilizing his knowledge of technology and in tandem with his experience as a musician to facilitate the creation of new works. Joshua, please join us and give us your presentation.
Thank you so much for the lovely intro. Just going to pull up the slides here. Cool. Again, my name is Josh Weinfeld. I'm a second-year student in the music tech program here. Going to graduate in about 2 weeks or so, or finish classes, which is pretty crazy. But I'm originally from the US, and thank you again for having me come talk here. And so I just wanted to give a little presentation about this piece I recorded called Blue Soul. This was an audio-video recording which was recorded last year in May. And I submitted this, the audio portion of it for the AES New York City conference for the student recording competition, and I was fortunate enough to win the acoustic category, which was really awesome. And yeah, and it was really great to be there and meet. That was my first time at any AES function, and it was great to see everyone there and experience that in New York, where I'm also from. So yeah, so a little bit about this piece. It was a piece called Blue Soul by Michael Burritt. He's the director of percussion program at Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York. And it was performed by a quintet of his grad students at Eastman. So I actually drove down in May from here to Rochester with everything that I had, basically, and I'll get into that in a second for that recording. And so a little bit about the instrumentation, which you'll see in the video as well. It has 5 players. Their main instruments are vibraphone, vibraphone 2, 2 marimbas, and then the 5th player kind of has an accessory of drums, accessory percussion, kick drum, glockenspiel, xylophone. It's a whole big kind of setup. And also, if anyone has any questions at any point, please feel free to stop me if I'm talking too fast. And so here's kind of a picture of the setup. I hope you can see that. Kind of have the 2 vibraphones spread out on the far left and far right, and then we have this marimba duet in the middle, and then behind everyone is this kind of accessory percussionist. Oh, thank you, Jeff. And
That's better.
Nice.
yeah, cool. Okay. And yeah, so the 2 marimbas in front, vibraphone 1, vibraphone 2, and then in the middle, in the back, we've got player 5, who has this massive accessory percussion setup. And so, kind of some considerations for this recording project. This was, the director reached out to me on behalf of my small recording company, which I started with my friend in undergrad while I was studying in the US. So he flew in from Nashville, where he's living now, and I drove down from Rochester to meet him there. And so this was going to be an audio-video recording, everything done together, which makes things a little bit tricky because video people always saying, get the mics out of the shot, this looks bad, you can't put this here, so it'd be, you know, there's a lot of considerations there. So that definitely went into consideration when compromising where can I put something, where can't I put something. This was also done with all personal or company equipment, basically the stuff that my friend and I have gathered over the few years that we've been doing this, and it was all mobile, so all the microphones, all the stands, all the lighting equipment, all the cameras, everything was brought by my friend and I. You'll see, I'll show you the inputs and the mics in a second, but kind of why things might be limited to a certain budget as what I'm capable of.
So there was no involvement from the Rochester, from the Eastman Audio Department?
No, not for this project.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily consult with them. They just kind of reached out to us for to do audio video for this piece. But I'm sure they're great and they have a wide range of gear available as well. And so with that in mind, in terms of having video going on at the same time and trying to keep the space less cluttered, and with having, you know, only so much of my personal gear available, I had this concept of wanting to capture setups rather than, you know, player 5, for example, has like 10 things that he's got going on here at least, and it really doesn't make sense in this situation, especially being in a concert hall. Like, I wasn't trying to capture every single instrument on its own, like, so you can hear the wood slat over here and the one conga, two congas. Like, it kind of gets too close and too personal rather than capturing the entire player's, you know, setup or area. So I took that kind of approach when deciding how to place microphones and kind of pan things around. Just in terms of the music, there's a big emphasis on rhythmic clarity, so there's a lot of split rhythms between different percussionists in the ensemble. So I wanted to make sure I was kind of close enough to capture these kinds of interlocking rhythms, especially from one side, like one vibraphone to the other, and they're halfway across the room, but without, again, feeling like it's in your face and you're standing right next to it. I still wanted it to sound like it's kind of in the hall, but have the same clarity as was needed. And so here's kind of this rough diagram that I made up for the setup. As you can see on this input list here, these are not the most expensive or crazy microphones that could possibly be used, as they're all my personal ones that I can afford. But I tried to be strategic with placement and keep in mind like what might sound good on certain instruments from experience, and also what needed the most clarity, what needed the most prominent voices and stuff like that. So the marimbas have matching pairs of AKG C214s. They're all cardioid. Player 5 is this player in the back here, which this big accessory kind of setup. So I used a small diaphragm condenser pair to try and capture the whole thing, in addition to add-ons for the kick drum. And he also actually plays harmonica at the end, which you'll see in the video in a second. And then I also wanted to make sure I had the balance of the hall and the close sound, the close mics and the hall mics. So I had a pair of line audio CM4s kind of centered in the room in the hall, while there was a pair of omnis, the line audio omnis, kind of spaced out on the left side and the right side of the concert hall. They're kind of back behind the riser of the stage.
The central pair, how were they distributed?
Say again. Sorry.
The main pair?
Yeah, so they were set up in like an ORTF kind of configuration, kind of as maybe 20 to maybe like 20 feet back from the edge of the stage.
And are those mics omnis?
So the middle pair in the ORTF are cardioid, and then the two kind of flank mics were the line audio omni mics. Yeah. And these were my kind of 16 inputs, as I only had 16 inputs available on my mobile rig at the time when I hoping to invest in more of that soon. But not necessarily that I needed more inputs, more just that I made sure I captured what needed to be heard and what I needed to balance in the mix based on my experience looking at the score ahead of time, and then giving attention to the most prominent voices and capturing the setups like I mentioned before. And so I want to show or listen to a few quick.
So before let's do it, you said a mobile rig.
Yes.
What mobile rig? I don't know if I missed.
Sorry, yeah. So I have kind of a rack case with a, I think at the time it was two Claret 8 pre-X's linked together with a ADAT connection. I don't think they make those anymore.
Never heard of that brand.
No, that's
Focusrite.
A Focusrite, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's one of the older Focusrite 8 input audio interfaces, but there are two of them with 8 channels each linked together. And that was kind of what I had available with me at the time. And I had two 8-channel snakes kind of running to the bottom of the stage where all the cables are run, just to keep things as clean as possible. Yeah, so, and there's like a power conditioner and other stuff in that rig, whatever I might need, a headphone amp, but we weren't using any. This is all without click tracks, so they're all playing live in the hall without any metronome or anything like that.
What's the recorder?
Sorry.
The recorder?
I was recording into my laptop on Pro Tools. So I just want to highlight a few different sections that kind of, there's 3 sections in this piece, and there's different voices that highlight all 3 of them before I play the video for you. So let me pull that up.
And is this mixed afterwards for a picture?
So the process for, I can just actually go that side. So the process in terms of recording and then afterwards, while we were recording, it was me in the room, my friend who was helping with video as well, in the room, the composer and the director of the ensemble, the same person. So he's kind of sitting in the back of the hall, and I'm listening in the room and telling him, how things are sounding, and he's giving them feedback based on what he's hearing, and I'm saying, the vibraphone's too bright here, maybe you switch mallets, or the glockenspiel needs to come down based on what I'm hearing, because it'll obviously be a little different than what he's hearing. And so we have, say, I think there were like 20 or 30 takes of various chunks of the whole piece, a couple of full runs and then chunking through the different sections as he saw fit. And then I sent him kind of rough mixes of each of those chunks, and we kind of went back and forth deciding, from measure 1 to measure 15, we're going to use take 1, and then from measure 15 to measure 100, we'll use take 10, and stuff like that, until we finally decided on the final edit of all those takes. And then after that, I went back in and did balancing and kind of found the right blend between the close mics and the hall mics, balancing the ensemble within each section, and for the different musical passages, like at the end there's a harmonica that comes in that needs kind of a special treatment because it's the softest thing battling everything else that's louder around it, and it's also in the back of the room based on kind of how he had configured the ensemble to perform, which was another consideration because I didn't really have the liberty to change that because they've been rehearsing this piece for 2 months in the same configuration. If I move someone around, it's going to mess up the whole way that they're hearing. So there's a performance aspect as well to it. And there's different moments where there are kind of split rhythms that need to be kind of evenly heard. So you might have three people playing on a tom or a wood slat that's kind of and you need to hear kind of a continuous line. So especially moments like that where I needed to go in and make sure the blend was right. And then just getting aesthetic things that I thought were most important, things like, there was some really harsh high end in the Glock occasionally when he would really attack a note with a lot of force, and boosting some of the low end of the marimbas because they kind of cushion this whole piece, and they're always playing even though you might not hear them. They're always resonating and they're always kind of providing sustain for the other voices, the vibraphones and the glockenspiel, the xylophone, to kind of ride over through the piece. And then, like I'm about to show, there are these 3 distinct sections. So the opening has a lot of mallets and a little bit of kind of playful, whimsical phrasing from the multi-percussionist, the part 5 in the back. The middle section, there's this big kind of 2D drum section where everyone goes into playing toms and drums that are also next to their setups, which complicates things in another way because we didn't have time to reconfigure all the mics, and the video had to look congruent, and we were doing audio and video at the same time. So rebalancing all the mics and stuff, because where the marimbas were really soft, now they're extremely loud because they're playing toms right in front of those same mics, so it's kind of gets complicated there. And then at the end there's this solo harmonica voice, which is also complicated because it's the farthest thing away from everybody, it's the softest thing, but it's the prominent voice, and so we kind of had to make sure we were balancing right, and I had to boost that at the end and make sure it was prominently heard while everyone's playing around it. So yeah, why don't I'll play the full piece now. It's about 8 minutes, and it has the video, which I also worked on as well. So we did both audio and video for this, but for the AES competition, they just heard the audio, so video was not considered for anything. But let me play this. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions after seeing? Sure. Yeah.
The composer must have been delighted.
Yes, he was very happy. Yes.
Who is the composer?
So his name is Michael Burritt.
Burritt.
Yeah, he's the director of the percussion program at the school where it's of course. Yes.
Yeah, great piece, well recorded. Just curious, do you know if the audio is flipped because the...
I think it's flipped.
I noticed that.
It's not me, I promise. But I heard when the wood slats came in, it sounded like over there rather than over here, so it might be.
Yeah, the gentleman on the far left, he's coming out on the right side.
Yeah, I think it's probably the big knob. Sorry about that.
Stop listening with your eyes, man.
Yeah, I was just curious how many cameras you used for the shoot, and what the position was, the thought behind that.
It's actually 2 or 3 cameras and a lot of takes. So
Cool.
It's the interesting thing with the process about a lot of the work that I do with my friend back home is it's always, instead of syncing to picture, it's audio first, that takes priority, and then syncing whatever we have that works with that. So occasionally it's stretching and having to interpolate frames in the video when you have to, or faking some things when it's like we concocted something that doesn't exist in the video. Hopefully that usually doesn't happen, but usually it's audio priority, and then a lot of takes gets us to, or a lot of camera angles if we know we're only going to get one shot.
So
Cool.
would you use one take for the video and combine it with a different take for the audio?
You could, but the issue is you'd have to stretch the video because it'll go out of sync. There are moments in this
But for short little...
for a short moment, definitely, like their tempo is really consistent throughout all the takes, especially in the drummy section. So we could pretty much get away with using, and obviously we're watching the waveforms and listening and making sure the clips don't go out of phase with each other. But like if we had to use a mismatching clip, we would if it's the right clip to show.
Did you stretch or shrink any audio?
Not in this one, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they aren't reading, I don't see anybody reading any, like, this is,
they memorized, yeah.
Yeah.
So they've been working on,
it's an incredibly complex piece to memorize.
yeah, I've heard, there's other groups that have played this piece and it's just not, like, they killed it in this.
Oh, yeah, because once you find your way back, would be like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it wasn't like the 20, 30 takes got us there, like even the full run take is very good, like there's little
It's
things.
beautifully recorded, that has the real potential to have some real jarring things, and
Yeah.
it's really consistent and pleasant sounding.
Yeah,
Like,
thank
beautiful job.
Yeah.
Is it insulting to get such a good tom sound and just have them play the rims?
I mean, we definitely spent some time, we did, a sound check, whatever, and then there were things like, there's rattle in the pedal of the vibe, so we put a towel under it, or
Yeah.
WD-40 or something, and then,
Percussion's hugely mechanical. You ran
yes,
into those kind of things.
we played for like 5 seconds, and I was like, okay, we need to deal with that, and the tom is rattling, the stand's shaking, stuff's happening, so definitely have to deal with that. Yeah, check.
Hey, Dustin, where were you?
I, so, I'm kind of snaked out on this house left over here. So like I'm sitting out kind of honestly on the floor, like because we didn't have access to anywhere else that really made sense. And so I'm kind of sitting in the audience basically, but trying to isolate myself with headphones.
What phones?
I think I just either had Audio-Technica M50Xs or a pair of Shure, it's like 170 or something. I forget the name, but
Closed or open back?
they were closed back. Yeah, because like there was too much sound.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the turnaround time from like start of loading to first record?
Yeah. So that's another thing. Yeah.
How many days?
This was all done in one day, but it was load in at 8 or 9 a.m. I think we finished at 3 or 4 p.m. So I mean, we took very little break. It's kind of unfortunately how our schedule goes while we're young and there's limited call time because someone else comes in and has a recital after. So it's,
How long was your post?
we released this in October, but it was done September, so it was May. But I mean, I sent him the takes, and then he was in Italy, so the actual editing time we maybe spent a month of back and forth. But
That's not bad.
it's not. Yeah, I mean, I sent him the stuff, and then he kind of disappeared.
And
right.
that includes the video.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many audio edits?
There's probably 14 or 15 cuts, and then maybe like a missed note where I plugged in like a note here and a note there. But most of them are at least 10
Transitions
measures.
from one take to the other?
Sorry, say again?
Most of the edits are transitions from one take to another?
Yeah, they all are. Yeah, there's whether I was fixing a note, like there was nothing that was done artificially. It was just if I took one take, put it here to fix a B natural that should have been a C from a Murma note that was crucial or something like that. But it's all from the various takes. Yeah. Yeah.
So did you do the video editing as well?
I worked on it with my partner. Yeah, but that's a joint effort.
So did you give him like an EDL of your edit maps from the audio, and did he chase videos first, or did he chase the best video clips and make it work?
Yeah, it's kind of, we're still trying to figure out, and I'm interested if anyone actually has more feedback on that, but like we're trying to figure out the best way to go about that. Currently, I keep track of every take that's used and where it was from in the original session, and I give him. I honestly take a screenshot of my edits, and each chunk of takes is color coded, so I can say this was from, time code from the session or from take 1, because we'll stop and start the cameras with every take, so he knows what take it's from. But it does get complicated when it can get really confusing because there's nothing. We don't have the infrastructure right now to be syncing everything under audio coming into the cameras while he's moving around and stuff like that. It doesn't really exactly help when you're editing audio first, and so it's like do whatever you want, and then you realize you have to make a video out of it.
Well, I mean, were they all the cameras with operators, or did you have some just like lock-offs?
No, this one they're all operated. So, and it's cut multiple takes. So like we might have done 2 full runs. For 1 full run, you see there's this angle where,
Right.
because no one else can be in the shot. So we did this one angle that's farther away. And then for the second run, we might have had 1 or 2 operators, myself and my friend. I was also doing some filming while trying to manage the audio, so are actually on the stage at that point. So we got this camera for 1 run, and then everything else is done between the different takes, saying we did take 1 of this section from here, and we're going to repeat that section, so let's get a different angle. And just, because we knew that their rhythm was consistent enough to be able to use mismatching takes, but we would have to use more cameras or more people if it was a really rubato kind of piece or something that wouldn't work with that.
But did you tell the operators who they had to be on at a certain part in the score?
No, because I mean it was just me and my friend, and we had score studied before, so we knew that the drummers are this is gonna be the drum section, but we both studied percussion, so we're familiar with this kind of music, luckily. So like we didn't specifically have to say be on this person here, unless it was like the harmonica solo. Make sure you get the harmonica solo, and we made notes before the session, but it wasn't specific things like we have to get. Like make sure we get it, and then we can make sure we get something else that complements it.
I've done this sort of thing many times, and the problem with video operators is, unless they're musicians, they're usually at the wrong place about a bar late every time. So a lot of the time, it's easier for me, especially with a 4K camera, to lock off 7 cameras.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I know that I'm going to get every solo, and I can just punch in and do the movement, because it's hard to find operators that know how to read music.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, luckily we score studied. Like that's what we did before the piece. We listened to. They had one previous recording from PASIC in the U.S. and other than that, like we score studied and learned the piece basically. So, and we both done stuff. We both worked for drum corps media, for example, and you learn the drill actually, like of the marching. Like we've done stuff being on the field, kind of following the snare drummers around, this kind of stuff. So, but yeah, again, like it's hard when someone might not have the musical background to know. Get the oboist here, and you're like, "What's an oboe?" Like, so definitely.
Nobody knows. What is
Should we hear it again and eat? We got two questions. We'll play it again. We'll eat that food, talk a little bit more, and come back at a 10-minute break. Yes, go ahead, please.
So if we want to listen to this on our own playback system, can we download this somehow or access it?
Yeah, so it's actually live on YouTube, called Blue Soul Michael Bird. You'll hopefully find it.
We'll put it in the Toronto AES website. Visit the website. You send me a link. We'll put it. We'll embed it in the bulletin along with this video for.
How compressed is the audio?
This one's a little more compressed for YouTube, and unfortunately, yeah. But I can send you a different version if you would like to hear it. Like the one I submitted for AES is not really pushed very far. It's more dynamic. But I know people.
Did you do 48K?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
And what was your bid depth?
24. Was there one more? Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a discrete 2-channel mix, or was it stereo derived from 5.1?
No, this is. I only did a stereo mix for this. Yeah.
Oh, one more question. The glockenspiel, I was paying attention to everything you were saying about the Glock.
Orchestra
Did
bells.
you use dynamic EQ for the Glock?
Yeah, there is a little bit, only at specific moments. Like I've automated it to come in. Like there's some moments where he goes pretty hard,
Right.
And it, like some of it I did with dynamic EQ because I didn't want to mess with the rest of the song, for example.
Exactly.
And then there's 1 or 2 moments where actually, because at the very end for this release version, I went through in RX and removed some floor squeaks and clicks and random things that while people are walking around on stage, and I did remove like one or attenuate 1 or 2 like resonances that just for some reason were very potent in that moment.
Rob, do you want to go flip the speakers left and right coming out of that Mackie Big Knob?
I think I'm good.
Okay, good.
Thanks
Okay.
for asking.
Just I know it triggers people. We'll go one more question, and I want to hear it again. And 10 points to the school for having beautiful tannoys that actually aren't blown. Kudos to the school, and kudos to the school. Appreciate it. Sorry, we've got 2 questions. Okay, another 2 questions, and we're done.
Why are we assuming that it's not the video that's not reversed?
Good. No. I'm pretty, I'm
Because of the
I'm
way the
pretty short.
xylophones are. Because of the way the xylophones
I'm
are.
about 98% short.
Yes.
Can we flip them? I mean, is
Can
it?
we,
is it
oh,
just-
jeez, yeah, go flip it, and then, yeah, flip it on Mac.
We'll turn the speakers up.
I don't know how to, I don't know how to do that, it's my day off.
Do you want to turn the speakers off before?
I know it triggers people, don't worry about it. Either we're, it's gonna be hard, or, I don't know, it doesn't matter, here.
So the dream
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and congratulations again, representing Toronto, thank you so very much.
Great to see you all. Some faces we haven't seen in a while, Rob.
Not to single anybody out.
Not to single anybody out, but good to see you. Good to see you. Absolutely. So,
renewed my membership today.
yeah, that's the last time I.
Good. Kicking you out of the meeting would have been hard. Oh, there you go.
I would have made you all leave.
I just wanted to say a couple of words about how this whole meeting came about. Frank, for years, has been trying to get Richard to come down and speak with us.
Yeah,
But
every
it's just
time I asked, he wouldn't come.
and it just never worked out. I ran into Richard. He gave the Heiser lecture at the AES convention this past fall, and I approached him and said, "Why don't you come talk to us in Toronto?" And happened that he was going to be going out on sabbatical, and then had some time to come talk to us. So that's how that came about. I also ran into Jeff at the same convention, and he was on cloud nine because his student won the student recording competition. And that's Josh here that you heard earlier. So, so that's just the, how this whole thing came together. And
Thank you, Alan. And to Alan's point, and to those who want to get involved in this group, we're an audio improvisational group. So if you have ideas for topics, like we've never said no. Wow, sometimes we've said no. If it's a real sales spiel, we typically say no. So we look for information, the dissemination of information. So please, if you have something of interest, or if you want to know something that nobody else is talking about, that's also a question you can ask Toronto AES, so please just reach out to us. So Richard King. Richard King is an educator, research, and Grammy Award-winning recording engineer. He's garnered Grammy Awards in many fields, including Best Engineer in both classical and non-classical categories. Richard is an associate professor with McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and as a long-standing member and fellow of the Audio Engineering Society. Thank you very much. He is a regular presenter, panelist. His research interests and publications include small environment acoustics, the process of music mixing, and immersive audio recording and reproduction. His book, when did the book come out?
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
Don't buy it.
Recording Orchestra is part of the AES Presents series. Don't buy it. Do you have a PDF download for us? Or? Oh, okay, so it's a newly expanded second edition, and it will be released in the spring, so don't buy the first edition. Please wait for the second edition, which will be updated. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Richard King to the AES.
I apologize, it's an old bio that the release got bumped now to the second edition is coming out in August of this year, so, but it'll be even better. There was a problem with the ISBN code or something, which caused a 6-month delay. Part of my duties as an AES fellow is to encourage you all to join the AES. I would assume most of you are members, but if there are any newcomers who are interested in what happens in the AES, and particularly in the Toronto chapter, please sign up. I'm sure you've already been told this, but this is part of all of our duties as members is to help increase membership and inspire you to join.
Hey, on that note, how's the McGill student chapter going? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Not as good as your chapter, but we're doing well. We're doing well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
Actually, we're doing this past year actually quite well. Yeah. So this is sort of a rehash of what I talked about in New York for the Heiser lecture So if you weren't there, this is gonna be fantastic for you, but if you were there, I apologize, it's gonna be a bit of duplication. It's a little bit different though, so if you forgive me and hang in there. And some of this stuff I'll kind of skip through too. I'm gonna try and watch the clock too, and not drag on any of this, but still cover all the content that I have here. I actually wanted to start, I just wanted to put the slide up to start, but I wanted to jump to a project I did during COVID. Let me see if this works. Yeah, so I don't know what you were all doing during COVID, the lockdown, but I was recording my ass off because I have 3 passports. I can kind of get to a lot of places really easily. So it was easy to get into the US because I was coming home, and then it was easy to come back across to Canada because I was coming home again. And it's just, you know, triple passports and always be in the right place at the right time. I had a project offered to me in the middle of the COVID lockdown, and I'm assuming it's the same here at the University of Toronto, in that we were all told no research activities involves any travel, no one goes anywhere, tell everyone you need to postpone unless you have exceptional circumstances. And at the time, I was teaching with George Massenberg, and so I asked him, I said, well, what would you do? Because we're not supposed to go anywhere, but would you, what do you think? And he said, man, you gotta take the gig. You gotta take the gig. So what it was is Eric Clapton wanted to play Royal Albert Hall in London. But with COVID, there would be no audience, and they kind of tossed around the idea of actually doing a concert with no one there in Royal Albert Hall, and finally decided, you know, this is ridiculous. We might as well just go to a little castle in south of London in Surrey, and just do it there with video, and disseminate it after the fact. So I got asked to come in and do audio because of the producer, who was Ross Teilman, who did the original Eric Clapton Unplugged album, you know, 20 years prior. So he asked me, and I kind of sat on it for about 12 hours, and then called him back and said, yes, I'm in, I'll do it. But as you can imagine, it was a ton of testing, quarantining. I flew in and had to quarantine for 5 days before being able to attend rehearsals, and there were these various systems of bubbles and who was allowed in which bubble and all of this, and I had to quarantine when I came home. I actually was flying through Toronto, so when I landed in Toronto, I had to go to an airport hotel and quarantine for 3 days before I could go back to Montreal after getting a COVID test and waiting for the results and all that. And I don't know if any of you traveled much during COVID, but it was a royal pain. This one was worth it. So they put me in this little, oh, it's not advancing. Sorry. Just there. They put me in this little cottage on the same property as the house where we shot. And I sat in here for 5 days. Every day they'd take a picture of the menu, and then I would text them back saying what I'd like for breakfast. And we'd show up at the door, you know, they'd knock and run away, you know, sort of like every day testing, you know, and putting a date on it, sending it back to them so they knew I was negative. So this is Cowdray House on the left, up on the hill here. This is they took it over. It's like a Chateau Wirelais kind of place, really fine dining and everything. And I don't know, about 12 or 15 bedrooms as well. And they took over the whole place for about a month to do this shoot with rehearsals. This is just another ruins nearby. This is sort of just to give you an idea of the countryside. This is the back of the house, sort of a group shot. Eric's right in the center there, in the middle there. Oh, up in top there, you could see this giant light that was, you know, 10,000 megawatts or whatever. They basically brought their own sun. So they could have it be daytime all the time, whether we were shooting in the evening or the morning. So it always looked the same inside the room. I'm not a lighting person, but it's sort of interesting. This is all the property around the house. Oh yeah, so then here's how they ran the bubbles. So when I first came out of quarantine, I was allowed in the red bubble so I could be with the musicians and the live sound mixer, who was just off the side. Buck Hall is where we set up everything. And then as you can see, the film people weren't allowed in the space, they had to stay in the green rooms, etc. And then when my truck showed up, which is the red TX, that amber rectangle, then I was kicked out of the main bubble, because then I was, infected by the truck people. So I couldn't be near the musicians at that point. We were, however, allowed in the room as long as the musicians hadn't vacated the room, like on a break or something. We could go in and look at mics or talk to the live sound mixer. Robert Collins was the live sound mixer, so most of what we were doing was splitting mics with him, and he had been there rehearsing with them for weeks, so he had really fine-tuned all of the kind of close mics, and we had a good conversation before about what to use in the first place, which was really helpful. And then I added a bunch of other mics to get something usable for Atmos, because this ended up being a film project as well as an album release. So we went into it needing capture points for Atmos. So while I'm sitting in this cottage, which is about a mile from the house, they were nice enough to zoom me in for the rehearsals, and they sent me a few audio movers, so I could actually hear pretty good audio right off the live sound console. I keep saying live sound. It was really just a monitor mix. There is no like front of house. There's a monitor mix. There's a few wedges there covered in red cloth that you can't really see, and some sort of fill from the rear. And so it was really, other than that, just a kind of an acoustic event. For the most part, they weren't wearing headphones, so they were just balancing acoustically. Steve Gadd playing drums, playing with his fingers most of the time to be soft enough to balance with Eric singing and playing acoustic guitar. But yeah, kind of a strange thing. They would send me videos like this one from time to time. Just give you an idea of what they're doing, the rehearsal stage of things. So this is what the room looks like on the inside. They sort of set up to shoot this way so cameras could get a look at them as a band. Lots of carpet and drapes and tapestries kind of damp down the room, because it was sort of a big dining hall that they emptied and then tried to damp a little bit. I just noticed on the right, you can see Eric's wearing headphones. He played a few tunes with the electric guitar, and so for that he needed headphones to hear himself singing. But for the most part, there are about 15 songs that were acoustic, so really was mostly with no headphones. Some more shots of the room here. But you can see the detail here. These are helmets, and there's like the quintessential one of the hallways, a suit of armor that you'd walk into and almost knock over. Interestingly enough, these blue sofas here, I'll come back to that in a second, because that's where I was able to hide my microphones. So Josh was talking about video directors who was saying, we can't see a single microphone anywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, so all of this. This is back to lighting. Incredible, I've never seen this before. This is basically, it's LED, but it's very strong LED light supported by a helium balloon. So they just kind of put this tank on and blew it up with helium like you do balloons for your kids' birthday parties. Floated up, and then they just tie it off at the height they wanted. So that no need for a huge truss or any of this.
And if it falls on your head,
So-
it does not hurt you.
I'm sure they for sure. But I'd say about every 36 hours, they'd have to kind of fill it up a little bit to make sure it stay up, because it would sort of leak.
Did you have to pitch everything down?
Yeah. So yeah, it affected Eric's vocals. Very funny. So, here's what I did for the surround capture. You remember that shot with those blue sofas out sort of in front of the band. So these are Omnis, DPA Omnis, and they're looking away from the musicians with a diffraction sphere attached to them to make them more cardioid above 1 kilohertz. So in higher frequencies they're cardioid, and in low frequencies they remain Omni.
Is that the larger AP ball?
It's the 50 mil, yeah. Sort of my favorite capture for surround, and that would have ended up being the core of the sound I used in the rear channels in the surround mix. I say surround, but we did 5.1 and Atmos. So. And this, at the back of the room, again, I would have loved to put this right up inside the group. This is it's called the bicycle seat, DPA 5100. Basically, it looks like a padded, well-padded bicycle seat with 6 channels in it. they've used Omni castles, but they put these, they're inside tubes, they're sort of ported, so they have a little bit more directionality than if they were just mounted on the surface of the seat. But there are 5 of them, and there's a transducer somewhere that's channel 6 that gives you LFE, but it's just the same as all the others. But anyway, I didn't use it. But I was only able to keep it at the back of the room, but I did use it. It's in the mix at a lower level, just kind of helping to glue and give the signature of this room that they were in. And then I had a couple of 414s up in the balconies, kind of looking from far, just for more ambience. And then for the height channels, I originally wanted to hang a line across above the band and do heights there, but they said, absolutely not. Anytime we move something an inch, Eric claps it. He's like, he wants to know what's happening and why things are moving, so just wouldn't recommend it. I said, well, look, I can hang it just behind him, and they said, he'll see it, he'll question it, it's gonna slow everything down. So finally, I said, well, look, how about I clamp something on the pipes where you're holding up that tapestry, or the curtains around the tapestry. So I'll show you another shot that shows the tapestry behind the band. But I was able to clamp into a pipe that was holding, these curtains, and then put these are Chef's cardioids, and they're just looking straight up. So they're behind the band, but worked pretty well to give me some capture that I could use in the high channels of the Atmos mix. Yeah, so here you see the tapestry pretty well, and you can, in this shot the pipes are exposed, but that's where I was clamped, and he didn't notice. So. As with Josh, any questions? Feel free to yell them out.
Yeah, so like you can't just go to like your local music store and rent Chef's MK4s and.
Sure you can.
So, okay. So
In the
what is
south
the
of
process
England?
when you're dealing at this level
Yeah.
to facilitate your preferred choice to accommodate in this session?
Yeah, so obviously months before, we all agree on an input list, and this is between me and the truck, mobile truck, and the live sound. And so everything's brought in. If I want something weird, well, 2 things happen. There's Claire's in London that can rent anything you want, so that was just booked ahead of time. DPA were very nice in sending stuff to us, like the bicycle seat, et cetera, and a few other things. And the chefs, they had him in the truck. They had him on their list, so I knew they were coming with the truck.
Is Europe, yeah.
Yeah, it's England, you know. I was born in England. I wouldn't say it's Europe. You know. Yeah.
Now, when you're dealing with a live sound person, so let's just say on Steve Gadd's kit, who's making the decision about like snare drum, overhead cymbals, and bass drum? Is it you or is it him?
So it's Robert Collins, and he's been working with Eric Clapton for, I don't know, like 40 years. So I wasn't going to say anything, except I wanted a specific capture for the guitar, which is a pair of DPA cardioids, and it's stereo, but they're mounted vertically, and they're pretty narrow, so that they give you some spread, but it's just a little nicer sounding than a mono guitar signal that you have to mix in with a mono vocal in the same place in your mix. So what I got was left-right guitar and a center vocal, so I could do kind of an LCR composite of guitar and vocal. And of course, he's singing in the guitar mic, singing the guitars in the vocal mic, so I kind of had to treat them as a 3 mic, I won't say array, because it's not at all that Frank's here. Plus
Which DPAs were they?
component. 4011s.
Okay, so they weren't in an MS. You just used them.
No, it's just like a pair, like a
Right.
stereo pair, but like this.
Okay.
Parallel or split?
Parallel, and I do that because I want the same sound on both mics. You know, when you do this, they sound a little different depending on where you are on the instrument, and if someone's moving, then, you know, but this is a little nicer. And you'd be surprised how the vocal bleed isn't super in one side and not the other, so it worked out. I don't think I had any other requests for him in terms of changing any other mics, just that's what I wanted to do on the guitar, and he was fine to do it, and he had the rehearsal time to check it out and everything.
I mean, that's awesome. Do you find that the 5100, the bicycle seat, is decorrelated enough for you to use?
It's not great.
Not great, right?
Not great, and I'm a huge DPA fan, but that's, yeah, I mean, I didn't buy one after I tried it several times in different places as well, not just this one time, so.
Because then also combined, you know, your immersive capture distances are actually quite large for the space in terms of on those poles and then also the couch beside.
The rest of it, yeah.
So the distances between those, is that why you basically kept that one pretty low in the mix, is that it didn't quite
It's
match?
just the fact that it's so distant from the band that it
Yeah.
didn't really give me much envelopment. It's
Yeah.
just another source of ambience, you know?
Right.
So, and I did allocate it, you know, LCR and surround to the channels, but it wasn't giving me that much in terms of glue. So a lot of the Atmos mix is signal sent from direct mics into reverbs, just to get me signals where I needed them to be. Yeah. Where are we at here? Right, so then the cameras rolled in and ruined everything. And I never understood this, but yeah, 8 cameras, but kind of all looking in the same direction. I think they were so worried about Eric saying something that they didn't come near anywhere or hide like a little GoPro somewhere to get. Anyway, to me it was bizarre, but it's certainly, yeah, you can see my DPAs there. I kept coming by and checking them every hour or so, see if they hadn't been whacked or, you know, spun around or something. But that's where we ended up. So the boat showed up pretty late in the game, before the actual shooting. Red TRX is really the name of the truck, and we ran this an SSL Vista console. It is a narrow truck.
SSL or Student?
Sorry, Student. Yeah, Student. Yeah, yes. Thanks. And there at one time it was going to be a live mix streamed, and thank God it wasn't, because my live mix was terrible. But yeah, then remixed the whole thing remotely, because this is COVID time. Russ Teidelman lives in New York, and I was in Montreal, and I would every day get him on audio movers and Zoom, and just going back and forth, and I'm making live changes for him, and he's calling out what he wants to hear differently and comparing, and I don't have it in this. Yeah, he would sit on his couch at home with his laptop on his knees and headphones, and he'd be going like this with the music, and the laptop be moving, so his face in the Zoom is going all over the place. It was hilarious. I took a little video of me. You could, I pan over to me on Zoom, kind of making this face, and then back to him, and he's like, So, but we mixed and he's a perfectionist, like incredible perfectionist. Where one day he'd say, "That's it, everything's great, it's great, it's great," and then he'd call me the next day and say, "The reverb's totally wrong. We got to go back in. We have to reassess the reverb and starting from scratch, every tune changing." And I'm talking like a half dB on some reverb return or something. Anyway. It was great working with him, and I was being paid by the day, and we think we mixed for 13 days, just stereo, and then I did surround, etc. He attended mastering remotely as well, worked out. But yeah, in the end, it became a full documentary film with interviews, and then also a concert performance, about an hour long, all with video, and then digital release, streaming, and yellow vinyl. They cut yellow vinyl, and it's also available in Atmos Music. And it's short, so I'll just play one tune from the video here. Any questions there? It's an Audio Technica 4055 from the vocal. Yep.
You had to write the level much on the vocal.
It's a lot of compression.
He's way off mic there.
He's a lot of rights. That microphone, I mean, it's probably, they don't make it anymore, but it's probably like a $300 microphone, but it's amazing how it sounds. And yeah, when he switches to electric, he comes up on the mic more because he's more aware, like he's wearing headphones, he's more aware of when he's on or off mic. So he's much closer, but it sounds about the same. I mean, it's just not a strong proximity effect. And I asked because originally I asked Robert Collins, I asked him, could we try a DPA de facto? He said, no way. He said, yeah, I'll try it, but it's too narrow. It's like it's a super cardio. So it's once you're over here, it's nothing. He said, I have to use this. I'm so used to Eric playing, singing live, and he's in the middle of a guitar solo, and at the end of the guitar solo, he looks up and realizes he's 8 feet from the mic and the voice is coming. So he needs a mic that can get him from anywhere. And there are times when it's obvious when he's way off, and you know, we chase it for sure. Compress quite a bit, but there's also quite a bit of level stuff. Yeah.
What's the model of the mic again?
Audio Technica 4055.
Thank you.
Pretty sure they don't make it anymore. It's from like 30 years ago. Yeah.
What
So it's
I mean, he's playing acoustic now. Like, there's a small amp there. What was everybody using for monitors?
So he had an amp because there are a couple tunes where he did play electric. But other than that, yeah, you can see a wedge by the drummer who's left. Everything was covered in red felt.
Oh.
And there's a wedge behind. That's Nathan East on the bass. That's just behind him. He's got a wedge. But yeah, and there were some fills like what you'd normally see as side fills were placed behind the band, really sort of low profile to you know, make it look like it's acoustic. You know.
So is that what was you're deriving your Atmos mix from those monitor leads, or were you creating it out of the actual mic and then putting it into those?
I was taking splitting all the mics. So yeah, there's a lot of direct signal as well in my mix, in both my stereo and my Atmos mixes. But then I had all these other capture points with other mics to build in the room sound. The wedges helped me get them into the room and more or less evenly balanced. You notice those of you who actually play drums that he was just barely breathing on the snare and the kick. But this is Russ Tidal, and he had this other sound in his head. It's like, no, the drums have to be like this. So yeah, you see them go like this, and you hear this snare like slamming. I was like an inch away from putting in drum replacements just to get him what he wanted, and finally I just I gotta say, Fab Filter, I just like compressed it, and I got a big kick drum sound from him just barely brushing the beater on the drum.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of nutty.
Did you find you had to, say, duck the guitar mics when he was singing?
No, so I just set a level that worked for the three elements, to balance the voice and guitar. But if I needed to go in and get a little more voice here or there, I kind of raise the three of them up and down as one thing.
Because I was thinking, if he's moving around, you can get that sort of weird phasing thing to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad into the guitar mics. Yeah, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of chasing and hiding and things. And there were also a lot of times where his kind of offbeat slap didn't line up with the drums, so there was a lot of cheating and moving things, and so you have to move the vocal and the guitar, but not when he's singing. Couldn't correct everything.
Wow.
Hold on, I almost forgot my question. Let me come back to it.
I remember now.
Oh yeah.
You said there was a lot of compression. Are you a multiple compressor, or are you a single user that does one compressor that does one thing? Like, explain like the philosophy of like really terrible off-axis microphone compression.
Well,
Or Eric Clapton grade, whichever
Okay.
you wish to describe.
So a lot of compression on the vocal mic.
Okay, yes.
So the rest of it, a little bit, but not too much.
But like, explain, not to take away your secret sauce of your vocal compression on Eric Clapton. Like what do you use on something like that, or like?
Long attacks, releases that people don't notice. Not a ton of gain reduction if I can get away with it.
What ratio?
I'm scared to go anything higher than 3 to 1, honestly. So it's subtle, but there's a lot of, when I said a lot of compression, for the drums, it's just a lot of adding gain, just to get it up there.
When you're doing that, like adding a lot of gain, like when somebody's playing so softly, like I saw you had like racks and racks of analog mic pre's, likely for your recording chain.
Yeah, so that was what they were doing for the live sound side of things.
Yeah. So were those live sound pre's as well? Like were they using like the racks?
Yeah,
and
we split the
leads
mics before the pre's. So our pre's it was all Studer pre's for then. It was going on fiber to the truck.
Okay, so what were the racks? There was like a Kelso or something.
Yeah, so there were sort of two producers. It was messy politically. Apparently Eric at one time had forgotten that he'd asked one of the producers to produce it, and then asked the other one. And then they were both in the gig and had to play nice, and it didn't affect me at all, but, so this other producer had all his stuff backstage, and, yeah, lots of, Abbey Road stuff, and Avalon, and Neve stuff, yeah.
I just wanted to know if you use a lot of compression. I mean, a lot of de-essing.
A tiny bit. What we did was, I didn't de-ess while I was mixing at all, but in mastering, the mastering engineer put a little dynamic EQ around, it was like 2.5K, just whenever his voice got a little raspy, or nasally almost, and it would just take it down in those odd words when that happened. But not a de-ess like we think of de-essing, maybe up at 7 kilohertz or something. Yeah, it was, I was brightening his vocal a little bit, but it didn't put us into that range where there was a lot of sibilance. Yeah, so we did that.
Who's playing keys?
Chris Stainton is playing keys. Yeah. Yeah, you sneak out, don't tell McGill what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you end up with Steve Gadd's email. It's kind of surreal.
Who chose Steve Gadd for that gig?
Well, this is Eric's band, basically, and he's definitely for the unplugged stuff, but they do tour, and it's consistent. I'm gonna go back to this. So I'm gonna try to go through this pretty quickly. Okay, what I'm seeing is different from what you're seeing. Okay. So stop me if I'm going too fast or if I gloss over something and you're like, wait, what? Just yell out, because a lot of this is maybe not that interesting. I should say that. So yeah, I put this together for the Heiser lecture. I modified it slightly, but basically just kind of a look at what I've been doing over the past 30 years since I got out of school, and things that sort of didn't really occur to me at the time, or that I've reflected back on and see them as kind of amazing things, but they're sort of everyday happenings in audio, really, in the end. And I should have started out by saying thanks for inviting me here. Finally
It's a
I'm
pleasure
here.
to have you. Thank you
And,
for being here.
and sorry, Frank, yes, for not coming all those years. You were asking me nothing personal at all, but
Oh, sure.
but it is. So this idea of sound recording theory and practice, they're like two sides of the fence with science and art, creative activities, and where I put in here the theory informs the practice. That's exactly it. And we don't always think of this as we're working and while you're in the trenches, but I was at Sony for a lot of years, and not every day was really that interesting. So there were times when I just found myself sitting there daydreaming and almost watching myself work, sort of like this virtual bird's eye view, and then realizing that I'm doing certain things over and over, and realizing that, oh, that must be a tool or a skill that I have, because I'm doing it over and over, so it must work. Anyway, so I just thought this was a kind of interesting thing to explore. Right, so on one side we've got the theory of audio, and then on the other side is, just making records, delivering masters in a timely fashion, and yeah, hoping you get called back by your client, But for me, all this started way back. I was doing live sound, I think I was about 17 years old, and my boss at the time was Jeff Doan. He works at CBC in Halifax. And I remember, well, two funny things. I was about 17, we'd be driving to gigs, he owned all the equipment, and he didn't want to hang out for the dance band all night, so he'd help set up, he'd come back for teardown, and then I would stay and mix the show. I remember driving to the gig once and knowing that he was 22, and I was looking at him, he was driving the van, I was thinking, man, he is so old. 22 years old. It's funny. But I still remember that it was a white van. Anyway, we're doing a sound check. It was a dance band, so like think Flashdance, Dirty Dancing soundtrack, Denise Williams, all that stuff. And I'm trying to get a sound on the kick drum, And I've got this thing, Soundcraft, 4 bands, fixed frequency EQs, right? And I'm trying to get something happening out of these 4 bands, and I'm 17, so I don't know what I'm doing. I was just looking for something that sounds good. And Jeff leans over to, because he was hanging out for the sound check, he leans over and he grabs the fader and just pushes it up. And he goes, "Is that what you were looking for?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'll do it." So, 20 years later, realizing, okay, this is what these equal loudness curves are all about. Frequency. It's an amazing moment that I just discovered that curves at that time. Anyway, so now with my students, I do this. We just turn it up. You want more kick drum? You want a better kick drum sound? Turn it up. So here's where I started. I studied music at Dalhousie in Nova Scotia. I studied percussion, and then did my master's at McGill. My first audio teacher, Peter Cook, is here. I learned more from him than anyone else. And Frank, who was in my class, always challenged me, and so there was no messing around. It had to be right or legitimate, or Frank would question it, and the rest of us would get in trouble. So definitely added to my education, for
You
sure.
kept doing it wrong.
I was doing it wrong. And before, when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I was playing in the youth orchestra, so I was covering a lot of classical repertoire, and I was also playing in a punk band. So my mother thought I was really well-rounded, Good balance. The band was called the Suburban Rebels, and quite often we'd do gigs with another band called Urban Attack. We'd fight over who went first. And anyway, this is a picture of me at McGill with my horrible hair. 1990, yeah. So this is VCA automation, no moving faders, just you're writing the moves into VCA computer, and then on your second pass you go down the console and you park every fader at the 0 point and the null point. And there were little red lights to tell you if you're above or below your previous mix pass, and you print your passes. It was a MCI automation on a Sony MCI console, and there, that computer monitor, I think it glowed amber or green, I forget.
Amber.
It was amber, yeah. It was the nastiest thing, but I thought, I gotta learn this so that I can go and then run other automation systems that are simpler and better. So that's where we started. You can see there's a loudspeaker up to the left there. So we actually had, back in that time, the Dolby Pro Logic system. So it was mono surround, but we had LCRS. So we were at that point getting into surround sound, or at least in some respect. It definitely got me thinking.
Is that Studio A?
Studio A.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
It's a little different. Before this time, you guys probably don't know this, but the console faced that way.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was narrow and deep, but by the time I showed up, it was facing the way it faces now. But I had a bet with someone to see who could go the longest without a haircut.
And you won.
I won.
Yeah.
Are you facing the outside then, the glass that faces the
Exactly.
outside?
So this is facing out to the.
You realize that we used to lock ourselves in then, because at the time, security couldn't get through the doors. So they would see us and try to wave at us to come out, and we'd just say no.
But that's back in the day when Studio A had the kindergarten colors in the main room.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
primary
that's right.
colors.
Yeah, I heard all those.
Like orangey, greeny, yeah, that's for sure. And after graduating, I went down to Sony. I was lucky enough to get an internship at Sony, which was at the time Sony Classical, so it was mainly classical recording when I first started. And one of the other engineers there, a younger assistant, asked if I knew about playback sessions, and I said, well, that's where you play back what you recorded, right? And he said, well, it's a little more complicated than that. And I learned about the entire kind of social dynamic that happens around an actual playback session, and how the producer and the engineer are basically on the hook at that moment to sell what they've got so far to the artist and get approval to move forward with the recording session and have the artist sign off on the sound, etc. This was a major opera session with a lot of big singers there and a lot of selling people, and it was, you know, the room was packed, and it's kind of, I was sort of oblivious at the time how important this was. But since then, realizing all of this, but since then, I came up with this list of 10 rules for playback session. And it's in the book, but I'll just run through them really quickly because I think it's not all of it's obvious. In the old days, we had to rewind the tape, right? So you'd ask the producer, what do you want to hear first? Take 63. So you look up your time code, type it in, locate. So you're rewinding while the artist is on their way to the control room. So then you're ready to play that take. Then, and no joke, press play and make sure it's actually gonna play, because you could be an input, someone might have muted the monitors up on the monitor switch on the producer's desk. You just never know. So I always do that. Also make sure I'm actually cued to right before music and not where the slate was or anything. Then don't press play until you see that the artist is ready to listen. The worst is if they're in the middle of a conversation, all of a sudden you blast them with something, you're not gonna last long in the control room. I'm always looking at the producer as to when to start the playback, and also, must be a later number. I keep it on the producer in case they look at me and they go like this, you know, they want a little more volume, because once you've got 8 people in the control room, it's gonna soak up a lot of sound, and maybe a little louder is gonna be better. Also, keep an eye on the producer and artist in case they wanna stop and rehear something, rewind a little bit, so this is always, you know, part of paying attention. Yeah, so volume, if they want a different volume, but always watching. And again, sometimes you'll see an artist react to something or frown, or they flip through their music, but they don't say anything, they don't say stop, wait, or anything, but I'll drop a marker, or I'll take a note of a time code, so that when we get to the very end, they say, well, there was just that one place, and as the operator, you'll know where to go and find it and replay for them. So that's very handy. Yeah, the worst is the assistant talking to the technician on the side of the room, blah, while the artist is trying to listen. Definitely, that should be number 1. And then my favorite is, don't flip back to input monitoring while the conductor or the artist is still in the control room with you, because the orchestra's out on stage, about to get ready to play. They're all making a lot of noise, tuning, practicing, and you just blast everyone in the control room if you do that. And even so, if it's pretty calm on stage, I'll hit the dim, go back to input, and then lift the dim. So it's like a couple of stages, not to shock anybody. This is a picture of a playback session with some jazz superstars, and you can see me. Look at, I'm scared to death. I'm just hoping no one says anything about the sound. They can talk about the tempo, the music, or the arrangement. As long as they don't talk about the sound, I know I'm okay. I'm gonna get through the day okay. That's at Sear Sound in New York. Yeah, I'm just like, please don't kill me. So early days at Sony, we had, with Sony, so we had the machines, we had the Japanese engineers close by with us, and we were recording. Well, everyone else was recording on 16 bits. We had these modified 20-bit machines. And in fact, they would call me the 20-bit kid because I would lug this converter thing to Europe with me on the plane, plug it into the multi-track machine, and do 20 bits everywhere we went. But at the time, this made a huge difference. And okay, now we're into much higher resolutions. But I was recording with the LA Phil and with a British producer, and he wanted everything live mixed 2-track, so he didn't care about the multi-track at all. We brought a multi-track as a backup, but what got edited was the live mix. He just didn't believe in remixing, and so the 2-track machine was a 20-bit machine, and the multi-track was a 16-bit multi-track. And there was my very first recording was Don Upshaw was singing. It was LA Phil. It was the chorale, master chorale, so chorus. Don Upshaw, another singer as well. It was Debussy, big orchestra, and I'm like 25 years old. I'm mixing my pants off live, and it went fine. It was okay, not great, but I wanted to remix the sections where Don Upshaw was singing because I didn't think I got her balance done really well. And the producer was like, no, it's fine, you're crazy, it sounds fine. If you want to remix it, whatever. So I went back, remixed it all, and then when it was time to cut that segment into the 20-bit master, just going from 20 bits to the 16-bit remix, it was such a difference in quality that the depth collapsed and the noise floor came up incredibly that I couldn't use it. I had to just stay with the 20-bit live mix. It was sort of a real kind of eye-opening experience for me at the time. These are the machines, Dash machines. And the way we got 20 bits on the machine on the left, they basically had 8 data tracks on tape, so 4 for left and 4 for right. And they would take 2 for 16 bits and then 2 for the extra bits to get to 20 bits, extra 4 bits for left and then for right.
Is that what they called super bit mapping?
No, that was when we were finished the project and we have a 20-bit master, we would run it through this box called the super bit mapper to get it to 16-bit for the master, U-matic master that would then be the release. Other companies were calling it super bullshit mastering instead of SPM and super bit mapping. But all it was dithering, good dithering and rounding to get down to 16. But it wasn't used during recording. So on the right, whenever I see this machine, anyone here from CBC Toronto?
Right here.
Yep.
So
You must
I
have had 50 of these.
So I saved one from the garbage. If you would like to go to our museum downstairs, at CBC, I put one in the museum.
I have such nostalgic feelings with these machines, and especially the 24-bit machine that came later. But to me, it's like being back with my high school girlfriend. Whenever I see
If you want to go touch it, I'll send you a picture.
That's it.
There's a YouTube video of it running for a couple hours.
I believe it. And these are for sale. I saw these on eBay or OfferUp. I saw this.
By the pound.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, basically.
I got 40 reels of unused 7-inch reels of that stuff in the walls.
Dash blank dash tape.
Yeah, still plastic bags in the.
So yeah, I told you about that. So how did we do 20-bit recording on the multi-track? So I had this suitcase that I drag around with me. We built these, we had these racks of 20-bit converters. Sony built the frame, but the chip was ultra analog. And it was a 20-bit converter that we could then come out and split the bits with this bit splitter, which is my silver suitcase. So for each audio channel, it would split the 16 and the 4 plus 4 bits, the 20 bits, and it would store them on separate adjacent tracks on the multi-track. So with the 48-track 16-bit tape deck, we get 24 tracks of 20-bit recording. And then we had a reverse box in our mixing room, which would take the signal off the tape and jam the bits back together and put them into the digital mixing console.
Wow.
To mix. So, yeah, and it was, and they had the same rack in Europe. So Sony had a sister studio in Hamburg. I was in New York, and so whenever we recorded in Europe, the tech crew would come out of Hamburg. So they would bring this blue rack, so we could do the same thing. But we were the only ones with this box to split the bits. I remember going through customs once. This is way before 9/11 or anything. With this ugly black box with wires, and you could see inside all the ribbon connectors and everything. And of course, it gets flagged, it's going through the belt, and this younger guy took it off, and he's like, "Is this yours?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm following them, and he starts to, wipe it with the stuff for explosives and all that. And this older gentleman comes up behind him, and he goes, who's working there, and he goes, let me see. And he puts he kind of looks inside, and he goes, "It's okay, I can tell." And that was thing. But, so for years we did that until then the Sony made an HR machine which was 24 bits. The problem with that was, still limited to single sample rate. So you could do 48 kilohertz, but you run out of, at 44.1, 24 bits, you run out of reel of tape 47 minutes. So changing a lot of tape, and Sony, us, the studio, we're charging Sony, the label, something like $375 a reel of tape. This is the good old days, for studio owners. 1997, we got the first 24-bit machines. So it was a big big change for us. Yeah, so recording classical music, huge dynamic range, and you've got the technology that can't really store all of that dynamic range. So what were we doing? Again, this machine had these ultra analog chips in, and we found that we could clip the machine without really hearing anything, you know, adverse. And we started to theorize, you know, maybe when it gets to the top at full level, it's actually ringing a little bit, and it's not actually squaring off the waveform. I'm sure it was, you know, creating something a little snowy or something. But what would happen is, I remember specifically, it was Philadelphia Orchestra, this huge bass drum moment, and we're looking at our preamps and we're turning down, and I'm like, guys, we're at like 15 dB on our main mics. You know, normally we record about 30 dB. We're doing all this for one or two huge bass drum moments, and then the rest of the time we're recording down in the noise, you know, because it still wasn't that, you know, quiet as a system. So I just started saying, you know what, let's let it go. It's one wavefront, bass drum especially, bang. And this is before, you know, the easy RX and stuff to fix, you know, problems like that. But we would just say, you know what, let a few bass drums light the whole machine up into the rest. We don't care, but at least the rest of the recording will get recorded in a decent area of signal and noise. Sort of became our MO. Okay, so this is a good one. Never used an Oratone in my life for what it was designed for. We had a Studio A, you'll remember, there was always a two-track studio analog machine in the back corner, and if we wanted to hear what something sounded like on a small driver in mono, we just put it through the speaker on the tape recorder. So you like check your vocal balance or something, you know, get rid of all the highs and the lows and see what's happening in your mid-range balance. However, there was one project with Joshua Bell, Bernstein Serenade, recorded in London, and throughout the piece there are parts written for snares on and snares off from the snare drum. And at one point in the last movement, the percussionist, it was a quick insert, you know, like pick it up at bar 53, let's go, boom. He didn't have time to get his snares on. He played the part. Josh Bell aced the violin part in that moment and said, that's it, I've never played it as good as that, we have to use that circle and tape. So great, the control room, this is great. But then the percussionist was like, I'm really sorry, but I didn't get the snares on. And we're like, oh God. So kind of forgetting about it, then we went and edited, and we're in the mixing stage of the project and realizing, oh shit, now we're in that section where for, you know, 4 measures, there's no snare. And this is before, like, it's easy, we weren't in a computer, we were mixing off one of these big tape decks. It was before times where you could easily drop in and sync up a sample or anything like that. So as a percussionist, study percussionist, I thought, well, why don't we drag a snare drum in the mix room, stick a mic on it, and I'll try to play along as best I can, and we'll match it up. The producer's like, that'll never work. And plus I hadn't been, you know, playing, you know, for years, so it, you know, would have been, I mean, it was a simple pattern, but whatever. Then it occurred to me that what we could do is, in fact, take an Oratone, which they were all over the place, I never used them. I said, what if we grab an Oratone, we feed it the snares off snare signal, place it physically on the head of the snare, and stick the mic underneath and record the snare. And it's perfectly in sync with the performance because we're triggering it from the snare track, and then mix it back in. Perfect. And you'll notice there's a ridge. The Oratone, the driver is set back slightly from this ridge. Right? You actually place it on a snare drum, and it doesn't affect the movement of the driver. It's like it was meant to be. Every record ever made after that, I used Oratone on a snare drum. What I have here is I have a section of the piece where the snare was played normally, and then I have the repaired section. If I could only find my mouse. Oh, there it is. I don't know if we'll really hear it in here. happens when I'm connected to a second monitor? Crazy. So I mentioned those times when I'm mixing and bored out of my mind and start to watch myself, you know, from somewhere virtually behind me, and seeing what I'm doing. And this is a prime example of this, where, well, two things I'm gonna talk about here. One is, it's where you grab the wrong fader, and we've all done this, right? Producer says more clarinet, and you grab the tambourine, and you start raising the tambourine, and you actually hear more clarinet.
Yeah.
You think until the producer says, "What are you doing raising the tambourine?" I said clarinet, and then you look down and go, "Oh, right." So, or you're on the wrong page, you know, of a desk with lots of pages, whatever. Or same with EQ, you know, you're making something brighter, and it's getting brighter, but then you look down and go, "Oh, this is a dead channel." It's just this whole concept of psychoacoustics. The other side of that is this idea of learning from watching yourself work, and I'm wondering if any of you have done this, but this occurred to me after watching myself repeat the same practice multiple times, realizing, wait a sec, I have a trick. This is a really cool trick. So it comes from mixing orchestra soloists with orchestra, but you could do this and I do it very easily with a singer that's got a band behind them as a backing track, and when the band's getting louder and you're losing the singer, you're grabbing the vocal fader and you're trying to chase the singer and get the singer to stay in the right perspective and picture. But generally you're late if you're listening to the singer. What I discovered was, forget about the soloist or the singer and just listen to the backing track. And so the producer would say, well, rewind, we're losing the fiddle there in the concerto setting. Let's back up and raise the violin through this orchestral crescendo. We back up and I start playing, and I'd ignore the violin, although my hand is on the violin fader. And as the orchestra's getting louder, I start raising the violin, but I'm following how the orchestra's getting loud and then soft again. And in a proactive manner, I'm doing it in sync, so I'm not slightly late, you know, because of the reaction time. And it works great. Try it if you've never tried this. But I do this all the time with any solo element in a mix, like a guitar solo or a singer, anything. Just you sort of split your brain. Of course, you're still hearing the balance overall, but focusing on the backing track and what's it's doing in terms of changing in its overall level, and how you need to follow that to keep your solo elements in the right balance. This is actually that same producer from England. He always wore headphones when we were recording, because he would be off to the side. He would let me sit in the center because I'm mixing live, so of course he'd be off to the side, so he'd wear headphones all the time. And he would wear these Stax headphones, you know,
Yeah.
they're very
Big ones.
open. But nonetheless, he would still always feel like he had to yell over the volume of the music to talk to me. This is something I discovered from the Walkman, you know, back in the early 80s, I guess, or late 70s. Sony Walkman, and it was just funny. You put the headphones in someone's head and they go, "That sounds great!"
Yeah.
You're the only one in the room hearing the music.
Yeah.
But it's never occurred to him, so he would always yell, and it would always be at the end of a finale movement or something,
no.
and he'd yell something like, "More strings!" And okay, got more strings. So yeah, just kind of a interesting thing. But the idea of masking it, couldn't hear his own voice because of the distractor. So I sort of got this bug for looking at elements of the theory of audio while practicing and making records, and from there started going, attending AES conventions, and not just doing the floor and going to see famous people in panels, but to go into the technical side and look at papers and publications and look at the real research and what people were discovering in the lab, let's say, and looking for ways I could apply that to how I was practicing as a mixer and a recording engineer, and found it was really, really helpful. Reading the journal, I mean, a lot of the journal is math, so it's not so great, but if you skip to the summaries, there's some good stuff in there quite a bit of the time that I find can be helpful as well. So from Sony, I was there for 15 years at Sony, and I was freelance for a while in New York. Then I went back to teach in Montreal. And my early research was looking at how mixing engineers who react to changes in the listening room. So how much are we affected by our own mixing environment? In other words, what's the best style or design of a control room? Do you want a room that's super dead, or do you want something more live, diffusion, etc.? So we did a lot of testing to look into this, and at one point we even designed these motorized triangles that could expose different acoustical treatments to the listener in the middle of the test. And I'm going to show you a video of how it works, but we put acoustically transparent screens so they couldn't see the wall surfaces either side of them as they were performing the tasks, but we could have them change in between each trial they did. And the first testing we did, we gave them a rotary pot with no kind of start or finish, just continuous wheel, and said balance the singer with the orchestra, or balance the pop singer with the pop band, or balance solo trumpet with this jazz track. And every trial, the level of the solo element was randomized, but usually down around -20, but it was randomized. So they couldn't just, dial up 3 times and get to the level. But we said, do it a number of times, like 18 times, and see how consistently you can set a level. And there were stems, so they were mixed, so you could set a static level that would make sense all the way through the segment. Anyway, so this just gives you an idea of what testing is. Well, we discovered that what kicks in here is oral plasticity, where the listener adapts very quickly to the environment they're in. And these are all graduate level audio students, so they would adapt very quickly and could be very consistent, report very consistent results under any of the environments. And in fact, we also had a survey we had them fill out, and they only knew this was randomized, but in other testing, we give them sort of 10 trials of treatment A, and then 10 of B, and 10 of C. And then we'd ask them afterwards, what was your favorite environment to mix under, A, B, or C, and which one did you like the least? And quite often, the one they chose that they said they were the least comfortable with, they actually scored the most consistently. So it was kind of all over the map. Let's see. Yeah, so the flip side of this is, well, it's great that we're so adaptable. However, this aspect can work against us as well. I'm sure this has happened to you. You're mixing in a room that's bass light, so you're pushing your kick drum and bass and everything, and then you take it home and it's just this big fat mess because you were fooled by the room you're in. So this idea of oral plasticity. Every control room I ever go in, I play some of the recordings that I'm really familiar with and start from that. And if it's determined that the room is bass light, then the rest of the project while I'm there, I'm reminding myself over and over that this room is bass light, and if my mix is bass light, it's probably okay. And just to kind of keep reminding myself, you can always go back and play your tracks and just orally remind yourself as well. But tricky thing. This is something I did, 2014. I've got a long version of this to show you, but I'll skip through it really fast. I I got the opportunity to work with, come on. Okay, what I see looks correct. I want you to see this. Oh, come on. I get there. Practice this at home, it was way better. I swear. Come on. Yeah, it's fighting me. Yes, got it. Yes, so this is a group of young musicians from Mongolia who want to preserve their traditional music, and they're playing authentic instruments, new instruments, but like period instruments, so built to represent what was used at the time. And they're also doing more modern arrangements of old songs from Mongolia. And for me, this super interesting project, you know, dinners every night, someone would always get up and start singing. It was just what you do at dinner with the Mongolian musicians, and they would take turns. And the last night, the last banquet, the young woman who was translating for me, she said, you know, you're gonna have to get up and sing. She just said, there's no way around it, there's no saying no, you have to do it. Anyway, so just like bluegrass or any folk music, it's the same. It's such a strong part of it. So all the musicians in the group, they play instruments, but they all sing. And they do this throat singing, which is called hume, which I was really worried about being able to record, because they insisted that they wanted to, and I actually agreed, they wanted to sing and play at the same time. And hearing some of the music and an older recording that they had done, realizing that this is the way it should be recorded anyway. But I was just really worried about how to properly capture this throat singing at the same time as their instruments, and worrying about the interaction. It's sort of like the Mongolian Eric Clapton sort of thing. Yeah, even the drummer singing, but that's another story. Yes, I'm gonna just skip through names exactly. They contacted me through my student, Fei Yu. She came from Beijing, and I think the first day of class, she said, I'm talking with this Mongolian group of musicians. They really want to work with you. They love what Yo-Yo Ma did with the Horsehead cello on his Silk Road projects, and they really want you to come over and record them. And so I said, well, okay, I guess, I don't know. And so I looked them up a bit, and asked for a substantial advance, just in case, you know, because I was paying my own flights and things like that. So, it worked out fine. She ended up coming. She was there anyway because it was summer. She was home for the summer, so she was translating. And when I say translating, she speaks Mandarin, and they speak a little bit of Mandarin, but then they speak Mongolian within the band, and then she would translate to me from Mandarin to English. So some things were a little bit of telephone, but it kind of worked out in the end. Right, so nothing's written down. These songs, you know, some of these are hundreds of years ago, these songs that they're trying to preserve, and they've just been passed down like most folk music globally, just by rote, learned by ear from each generations. And so they just got these songs they learned from their you know, older family members, etc. And then they arranged them for their group. So this is Narsu. He's sort of the leader of the group, and he's learning this song from his uncle. His uncle's teaching him this I don't know if it's really 500 years old, but I might be exaggerating a little bit. So An officer writes it down, it looks like this. This is, this is my going text. I just show this because I think it just looks beautiful. And it's read vertically, which is really interesting as well. So from there, they shot video of some of their rehearsals, so I could learn the music. And I just going into this knowing we're going to edit this in the classical style where we cut all the tracks because they're singing and playing all at once. I needed scores, and again, nothing's written down, right? So I'm just watching the video and I'm making my own roadmaps, rough roadmaps of each song. So here's a rehearsal of that same tune. So I write it out to look like this. So 4 bars drum intro, then we got a melody instrumental, we got a verse. Later I write in who's singing which verse, so just to keep track as well. My student, Faye, she wrote out a few, and they look like this. Absolutely perfect. In Chinese solfege. So the number system, 1 through 8 in the scale, and then the dots and dashes indicate rhythm. Which is, so I sort of learned to read this. And this is great, except there wasn't room to take notes, so I ended up using my scores instead. And by the end of each session for each tune, it looked like this. Chicken scratching. And then a couple of, some extra overdubs for certain instruments, but mostly live. And then from here, I made an edit. The edit map is in green. You can see my splice points where we cut these together. Keeping track of tempos, etc. They weren't to a click at all, but just knowing what tempo they agreed on, I could check them if they did extra takes. Go from there. So this tune didn't have any throat singing in it, as you heard a little bit there, but I'll talk about some of the throat singing they were doing. If you've never heard this, it's kind of amazing, but then at the same time, it makes perfect sense how it works. The high hume, there's 2 types, high and low. I'm going to skip the long song singing because it's a different thing and it's not as impressive. But basically, the way the hume works is they sing a low note and they sing it in a kind of rough, rich way to excite as much of the higher overtones as possible. And from that point, by changing the shape of their mouths, they like opera singers focus on formants. They can highlight certain frequencies, overtones with the harmonic series separately than others. And so, you can all try this at home. I've never done this, so I won't even show you. But basically, just changing the shape of your mouth, you can hear this, the change in pitch. And of course, once you get 3 octaves above the fundamental, you get into the range where you have a scale. So it's not quite in tune. You can see that, B flats, it's a low B flat, F sharps, it's not quite in tune either. But up in that range, little melodies can be sung over this held low note. Right, just like it works on a Baroque trumpet. This is basic physics. So no vowels, right? This is just the changing the pressure of the lips. So the high hume goes something like this, and in fact what I've shown here is that the note is actually an octave below, the blue note with the fundamental will be an octave below that to get to these harmonics. And here I have an example. So what I'm going to play you is just his Uni's vocal mic, so that you get an idea of how strongly they can do this compared to the volume of their instrument that they're playing. And I was surprised how loudly they can do this. So all my concern about getting enough voice was didn't happen. It just it's worked out. So this is. So, yeah, you can try this. Me trying to do it on the fly. The lohume is basically a technique where a note is sung, the throat is relaxed to the point where it starts to sympathetically vibrate, but at exactly half the speed of the notes that's being sung, giving you an octave below. And yeah, which sounds really powerful. And here he's doing, this is Chingle, he's doing, he starts a note, the octave below joins, and then he starts to improvise in that range 3 octaves above.
Wow. You must have a sore mouth when he's finished.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so back to the harmonic series. Trumpet, it's just the open vowels, and it's a major scale by the time he gets up into the higher range of it. So then, you know, what happens with so how do you do it in minor keys? Because we're stuck in this major structure, right, physically. Here's what they do. If you do a low C, you get these notes, right? But let's say the piece is in C minor. If you're in C minor, they'll hold an E flat as their bass.
Isn't that interesting?
They figured this all out. This is for years, hundreds of years, so they can get to these notes,
Yeah.
right? In E flat. So they can do the minor third, and they can do a minor seventh.
Pentatonic, I think.
Right.
Exactly.
It's a pentatonic.
So, yeah, fascinating. Simple, but fascinating to someone like me walking in and never hearing any of this or not knowing the practice
That's
at all.
interesting.
However, they're not the only throat singers out there. You know, we have Tanya Taya here, who does a lot of throat singing. Lila Hathaway, I should have the link for this, but if you don't know about her, she can harmonize in the upper register throat singing. And there's a Snarky Puppy video you can find on YouTube. That's it's unbelievable what she can do with this. And then of course our friend James Hetfield does the low hume all the time when he's singing with Metallica. He gets the lower octave, and sometimes you're wondering, wait, which octave is he singing in? It's like, no, it's both. He's doing it. That's just, I don't know if he realizes where the technique comes from, but he's doing it.
Have you heard of this guy, David Hikes?
Yeah, David Hikes as well. I'm gonna skip a bunch of stuff here. Yeah, just the. lots of drinking at night.
No.
Yeah, this is the studio we worked in, pretty modern, pretty nice. So yeah, some isolation just to get some clarity on certain instruments, but really we're just wide open in terms of the recording. It's just shots of different instruments.
So only the instruments were unplugged.
Yeah, there was nothing plugged in this is top show. I have little samples. So that some kind of goat skin stretched over a kind of trapezoidal box, and yeah, this horsehair cello, it's played. The bow runs between the two strings. So if you want the lower string, I think you push towards you. If you want the higher string, you pull away from it. And then there's no fingerboard. I mean, there is, but they don't use the fingerboard. The strings are suspended in midair, and they use the side of their nail to touch the string to shorten it, like you would on a violin. Instead of pressing down, they touch the side of it to change pitch. Mato chin, right?
Yes,
In Mandarin.
Yeah. And I play this one.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, not this, but similar to that. It's
Okay.
I play erhu.
Erhu, yeah. And then a series of flutes. You can see it behind him on the floor. He's got a flute for every key. And some drums.
He was that vocal and flute.
Yeah. So he's singing through it while he's playing the flute. Drums, again, these are designed to be replicas of old instruments, and of course, they sound terrible. There's no way to change the tension on the drum skin other than soaking it and then hitting it with a hairdryer to get it to stretch and get the pitch up. So he was every morning he was in there with the hairdryer.
Just like 500 years ago.
Yeah. nothing below like 80 hertz from this drum, but then I would send them the first mix and they said, no, it has to sound like thunder, big sounding drums. So completely fabricated in the mix. But you can see, so D112, what else? And then he would have shells and rattles and stuff around his ankles like bracelets, so he could do sort of hi-hat with his foot with something wrapped around his ankle. So I have a 451 there by his ankle for ankle sound, etc. And the way I did was this, so your typical cardioid dynamic mic for the impact of the drum. And on the other side, it's a 414 set to Omni, and I'm really close to the head to try to get some weight out of it. I don't know how well this will come across in this room, but here's the drums, as is, no processing. And here's with processing. Full. Two singers there. It wasn't one guy doing a fifth, fifth octave, just for the record. So I was kind of mixing for the live mix and then taking notes at the same time during the sessions. And then I, yeah, edited back in Montreal, sent it to them. They have a new tour coming in North America. They're going to be around. They're getting a lot more attention now. Within China as a whole, they're winning sort of like the equivalent of Battle of the Bands now. Quite so they're getting a lot more of a following, which is really great.
Sorry, what does that say again? What's the name?
And a Union. It's blue on blue. That's terrible. AndaUnion.com. This woman, I'm blanking on her name right now, but her 6-year-old son was around one day, and he was in the lounge, and he's throat singing, and I'm like, okay, this is how they get so good at it. They start with their 6, you know? Yeah. Psychonkia. Yeah, it's just some nice black and whites from the shop. Here's Faye, my student. So she was on the talkback talking to them. I was learning a lot of Mandarin, at least, which is good. Control room shots. Yeah. I'm gonna stop there, but that's the.
Yeah, looks like you had a great time.
It was absolutely worth going, and I learned so much. It was amazing.
When did you go?
2014. So I'm gonna flip back to this one. Without making this go too long, I want to finish where I got to with more recent research. Come on. Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So this is more recent research. We collaborated with Eidos, video game company, to work out a way to see if we could effectively create ambience in a video game scene without using sound design, by using actual music. And so we did a lot of recording in different ways. We had channel-based approach, so we're using traditional microphone setups. But we also had a lot of ambisonic captures around the room. And the idea was to, with crossfading between ambisonic capture points, create motion in the music that would then match a player in this game navigating through a scene. This scene is called Forest Walk. And the idea is you can go in the forest, and as you navigate through, the music's kind of following you and interacting with what you're doing. So that each time you play the game, you get a different experience, and you sort of become the composer in a way where you can change the musical presentation as you go through. So this is our room at McGill's. This is MMR. It's a big room. It's like bigger than Abbey Road, and the ceiling's higher. It's a lot of diffusion.
Did the Beatles record there?
They wanted to, but we were busy that week.
No,
It was very hard to get in this room. The map on this right side is a mess, but just to show that we had multiple ambisonic capture points. So we used ambios, which are first order ambisonics, but also the Zelia, which is a third order ambisonic capture. I think it has 19 capsules. And also the Eigenmike EM32, which is fourth order. And the idea of ambisonics is that from a single capture point, you can get everything you need, and then after you render and using beaming forming, you can manipulate the sound however you want, in theory. So this is the idea, and the whole project was mixed in the WISE, the video game engine, and which can handle ambisonics at this point now, even ambisonic convolutions for reverbs. So we also went to a few. Well, we measured this room. We did sweeps and made convolution IRs of this room in ambisonics. But we also wanted some longer reverbs. The beauty of convolution reverb is that you can't really change it. So we went to Saint Jean Baptiste, this large church, and we made ambisonic captures there, IRs, that we could also use. Yeah.
Richard, in playback of ambisonic, have you ever had an experience of a really realistic reperformance in a playback of ambisonic?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I'm sure it has been done.
I haven't.
Yeah.
Never
I-
have.
Yeah. This isn't big video, right?
No.
I have to say, I'm not a huge fan. Maybe it's just not there yet. And also timbrally, it just doesn't sound as good.
Right.
So also in that shot were, regular microphones, which just sound better. Yeah, sorry, you're behind my lamp, so. Go ahead.
No, other than agreeing with you, what order microphones are you doing IRs for ambisonics with? Are you using the Eigen mic or are you doing fourth?
We did it with the Zelia, so that would have been.
Third?
Third order.
Third order, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's just amazing to me that the Wise game engine can handle all these, this ambisonic. So I'm going to show you a video recording of someone navigating through the scene in real time, interactively. And in the immersive mix, there are sounds that are musical objects that are connected with certain emitters. Like you'll see these orbs floating, and if you're listening in Atmos, you actually can trace these things moving around the room with you. It's pretty effective. And the ambisonic ambiances work really well, but the actual music, well, I'm confusing two things. Having objects, musical sound sources that were attached as objects to these emitters didn't work using ambisonic, so we had to use regular microphone techniques for those. So it ended up being a hybrid. We realized that it couldn't be one or the other. It had to be, to work really well, had to be a combination of the two. But the ambisonic IR captures worked really well, actually. I mean, you capture a point in a church and then you put it into the game engine, and just immediately works great. For me, my problem with ambisonics in general is if you try to stick one in front of an orchestra and then make sense of it, by the time you've adjusted gains to make sense of to get it to the point where it's what you want to hear, it's just completely collapsed, it's broken down, and it just doesn't work. So, I bought an Eigen mic 64, it's like 64 capsules, and it was a lot of money, but jury's out. I haven't really heard much that's been recorded with it. We just got it a few weeks ago. So. But I want to show you. Yeah, just to go really quick, just recent recordings that I've been doing in immersive for classical and acoustic recordings. This is sort of my main approach. So I'm working with these guys, doing a whole run of Beethoven symphonies, well, all of them, arranged for a trio, piano, violin, cello. And so far, we haven't done number 9 yet, which has the chorus and everything, and they're still arguing about how the hell to do it. I think a viola is going to join, so Beethoven for 3 plus viola, I don't know.
Barbershop quartet.
But it's in the works. We're doing a lot of recording at Tanglewood, which is the summer home of the Boston Symphony in Western Massachusetts, in the Ozawa Hall, which is a pretty great hall. And for the stereo mixes of those, it's literally been 2 microphones, and then I'm sending a little bit of signal from the violin and cello mics pre-fader to the reverb, just to get them in the same space as the piano a little bit. But I'm not adding any overall reverb. It just, the room just works really well for chamber music. But we did the last set of sessions, we were at Impact, which is in Troy, New York, a different hall, but with an incredible system of variable acoustics. And what occurred to me, what's so great about a room with variable acoustics, not that you can get whatever kind of room you want out of it, which of course, to me, I think of that and think, wow, it's gonna take days just figuring out how we want the room to sound. The musicians are gonna go nuts waiting for us. But the real value of it was that we were able to make this room sound like the Tanglewood room, because this series of recordings,
Right.
sometimes there'd be a trio added from the year before, that was recorded the year before from Tanglewood, and we had to match it with this hall, et cetera, et cetera. And because it's a series, we wanted the whole series anyway to sound pretty much the same. So we were able, with these banners, to adjust how much damping we were getting at different parts of the hall to make it sound as much as possible like the Tanglewood Hall.
Wow.
And we got really damn close. The surface up above, the upper surface where you see the black banners, it's actually concrete. And then it has these sort of smoothed ovals that either concave or convex, you know, some of them stick out, some don't. And it looks amazing. There's a ton of wood. It looks amazing, but there's a lot of kind of 4K in the reverb, which makes the room sound kind of cold. So out farther in the room, we started damping that down a lot to kind of warm up the tail a little bit, to the point where the tail was slightly too short, but then with artificial reverb, we kind of got it back to the exact tail of the Tanglewood Hall. But timbrally, we were able to get a really close match by doing that, so that really.
Is that the hall above the bank? Is it the?
No, so yeah, Troy Savings Bank has a music hall above. It's like a mini opera house. It's this cute little, I've worked in there a bunch of times. This is farther up the hill at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is a big school for acoustics and architecture. And so they have this center called MPAC in this huge hall. It's actually really good. Yeah, we just set up backstage. They have an amazing control room, like 3 floors up, but it's too far. You know, the artists want to come and listen quickly, so we just set up right off the backstage, so they can come and listen.
So are we going to hear a little snippet at number 6?
I don't have
Oh, okay.
audio of any of this. Sorry. But I can just show you quickly. These albums are they're all available in Dolby Atmos as well as stereo. This might be what would be typical for stereo capture with the trio set up. And here's how I do for immersive. I don't have the height mics drawn on here, but what I do is on the same stands as the left and right mics, I clamp my left and right mains below the top of the stand, so I put my height mics on the same stands at the top, about 1 meter higher. And then just less stuff in the way, and I can get a pretty good height capture with that. And then I do a basic array of 7 channels to get the rest of it. I've done a lot of recording where I fake the height rear instead of setting up mics there, because I'm a strong believer that with the signal coming out of the normal rear surround channels, and with you facing away from it, it pretty much masks any real detail of what's happening in the upper height channels in the rear. When it's all like this, when it's just hall sound, you know, it's not, if there were a shaker or something, it'd be a different story. But I can fake it just as easily as setting up more mics, so I've been doing that.
Richard, are those all 4006s or?
So LCR 4006s, and then the rear surround, the side surround and rear surround are 4041s,
Okay.
which is the 1-inch DPA Omni. And then for heights, I'm just looking to see if it says on here. Pretty sure for this recording, it was, wait, this is what, August. This was Cardioids, KM140s, Norman's looking. So basically, yeah, if the piano were here, then they were looking out away from the piano.
Do you have any issues? You know, I play piano. I just know that some of these other instruments can get blasted right off the planet, you know, with the piano. Do you, how do you deal with the lid and the position of the?
So always full stick, always full
Right.
lid. Super sensitive pianist, Emmanuel Axe, he can
Gotcha,
just,
yeah.
he will just balance with the group.
Super.
But Yo-Yo's pretty loud, and this is Leonidas Kavakos playing violin, and he kind of plays like he's playing concerto all the time.
Okay.
He's too loud a lot of the time.
Okay.
So it was fine, and then, well, a picture, I think there was an earlier photo. But you can see here the cello box there, and the main mics, like, I'm right up on the group.
Gotcha.
So the piano can be loud at times, but it's very direct. It's not a diffuse, roomy piano sound,
Gotcha.
because I'm right in there with my main capture. So it's pretty clean, works pretty well. And we do, I mean, with this recording technique, we rely on them to come in and listen and hear the balance and then go back and adjust.
Oh, yeah.
And they're more than happy to do it. They even say that I joke, I say, you guys are doing all the work, I just, 2 mics up, and they say, well, we should be balancing properly, it doesn't make sense for musicians to play whatever, and then, in the back room, it's all manipulated to make sense, right?
Right.
Just real quick, so the LCR 4006 is the yellow, and then, height mics, okay, in this case, I actually angled towards slightly the ensemble. Yeah, I know what I was doing, I was using the cardioid polar pattern and kind of changing the angle to determine how much direct or attenuation I was getting with those. And then you could see the 4041s in green, the sides and the green. And we just went back in February and I actually did 4006 with the sphere for the heights, and then I faced them away. I haven't heard it yet, so I have to make a decision on which is working better. Before April, we're doing another. And then, just 7.1.4 monitoring. So the green and the red would be the upper ring of 4 speakers, but basically a 7 ring. But for me, I think this is the minimum for doing really good immersive mixing, to have a minimum number of channels. More questions on that? Because I'm going to change gears in a second. Yeah.
I've been setting up an Atmos room right now, and the reading that I've been doing on it, and I don't know if you incorporate this into yours, but the two in a 9.1 situation or 9.14 situation, the 2 wide ones when you're mixing, the reading I've been doing, they're talking about those 2 extra ones as the wide stereo really adds to the creative aspect of mixing an Atmos, especially in classical music.
Yeah,
do you find that at all in comparison to 7.14?
There's a pretty heavy debate. I talk to Atmos mixers all the time, and I'm actually on a committee that I'm not supposed to talk about at the Grammys, where we meet every fall and listen to everything and talk about everything we're doing. But I'm not supposed to talk about it. But however, a lot of people are saying yes, 9.6 should be the way we're going, 9.1.6, and that having 6 overhead is better. I don't see the point of 6 overhead personally, but you don't think it adds much to have 2 right over you if you've got 4. But the idea of having 5 channels in the front basically would be the 9. So you'd add another channel here. So you get an LL and then LCR, RR. The idea that you could widen out the front while you're mixing, and it's a bona fide theory, but I find I use the sides a lot to do that, where I send signal out there and I darken it because it's right on the ear, so I roll it off and tend to delay it as well from the front. So we still hear the front information first, so that's the focus. But I can bring out the front image quite a bit with just this setup. It works quite well. I had another thought about that, but that's gone. So, but there's kind of 2 schools of thought. There are a lot of people who think that this is enough channels as a standard, and if you want to mix them more, fine. A lot of people don't have the real estate in their mixing room to add more loudspeakers as well. And to what benefit? I mean, it's more channels. We have a room with 30 loudspeakers at McGill. We were doing a lot with the Japanese broadcaster standard, which is 22.2. So it was a ring of 10 plus another ring of, I think it's 8 or so, and then a lower 3 in the front, 2 subwoofers. So there's, it comes down to what you can manage.
Yeah.
Considering the audience and for music, do you double check in Atmos for headphones?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, where I do my mastering at Smart Stereo at Le Lab in Montreal, he's got an iPad connecting to his brains where he can switch, and I go in and first he says, what headphones do you want? He's got about 50 pairs of headphones. And he's got all the correction software. So it's whatever I want to hear. I put them on, and then I can go, it's like a switcher, like an external returns on a console, and I can go right down the line. I can hear Atmos with spatialization on and off, or like in mid or near or off. I can hear Apple, and I can hear Sony 360. I can hear various other things. He's got like an L Acoustics one, L Lisa it's called. And then he's got his own modified Atmos HRTF that that sounds way better than what Atmos is using. He's basically taken the additional HRTF out of the picture EQ wise. It sounds a lot more pure.
Wow.
It's like a small tiled bathroom, but it's kind of amazing. He got the Apple footprint by, well, Atmos you can hear, right? Anyone with Atmos at home, you can hear what they're doing. But for Apple, he actually created a record label, uploaded a file with beats, like loops, and about 2 minutes into music cuts, and there's a sweep on every channel. And so then he records it back, does the IR, convolution, and he's got Apple's basically binaural processing. So you can play that. It's pretty slick. It's pretty good. I know I was going to say back to this was just that the way I've drawn it, it's not exactly what Dolby recommends. Dolby with Atmos, they recommend you have the heights more over you, sort of more of a dome configuration. That's another thing. Almost all the mixers I've talked to, they don't like that sound, and they pretty much all follow like the Oro 9.1, where they have their heights above their front, left, right. And it works out. It's just a question of how once you're calibrated, it's pretty much the same experience anyway. But I have this set up at home too. They're pretty much above. Works pretty well. I'm wondering if I should go. I've got like 20 more minutes of stuff, but I should probably maybe.
Well, I'm looking at Jeff. Jeff is the one that kicks us out of here. He's enjoying this one. He's usually looking at me when to shut it down, so I haven't seen him glance over here.
I can rifle through. Like 2 things left. I'll rifle through.
Let's say 10 minutes of presentation. Go for it.
And I'll put my email up so you can ask me questions and email me later. Whatever. I'm happy to answer. It's a paper we did on the use of LFE in binaural. In Apple specifically, but also Sony 360 at the time. But what happens on Apple and with Dolby when you mix in a lot of your LFE level in a multi-channel mix into your binaural encoding. And just to really quickly look at this, we measured everybody. And this was the result basically showing that everyone's doing a different filter on the LFE. So you really don't know what you're going to get out unless you were able to hear all these while you're mixing. And the 3 of these are different Apple iterations. So Apple is blue. This is one Apple curve that they were using. This is a roll-off for the LFE channel, right, the low-pass filter. From 2022, in 2021, it looked like this, at a higher frequency. So anything you submitted and you liked from 2021 now sounds different if you go back and stream, because they changed the filter. And if you're mixing in Logic Pro and you put the spatial audio on in Logic Pro to check what your binaural rendering is going to sound like, that curve is, help me, light blue. Look at this. It's way out here. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing. This is the phase ramp. This is phase ramp. This is frequency. So here, it goes way up to like 150 hertz. We're really smooth. So totally different. It's like so much more low end getting through into the mix than what actually happens when you stream it, which is here they're all cut off. Oh shit. Just very different.
What's that? What is the frequency where they're cut off at the bottom there?
Here, so that's 125 right
okay.
here.
Yeah.
But they start sometimes earlier.
And then some of them are really aggressive, eh?
Some at 80. But what's interesting to note is, for a while, Apple wasn't doing a linear phase. They were doing minimum phase.
Yeah.
This is what we see above, is these phase wraps. So exactly at 63 hertz, Apple 2022 will cancel, your LFE will cancel at 63 hertz whatever is in your main LCR channels.
Wow.
So you'll end up, if you're aggressively pushing your LFE, you will lose low end in the binaural version of it when it's streamed.
Huh.
And I could play something for that. Anyway, we sent this to Apple and they fixed it since, which is great. It just turned out that different places within Apple weren't talking to each other, and Dolby won't talk to us. They're bad because of this paper. He talked about how well, what happens in the binaural processing when, in headphones, your right ear doesn't get the
Yeah.
left signal like it does in loudspeakers, right? There's no acoustic crossfeed, so they introduce a crossfeed to simulate this, and this is how, with binaural, you can hear an image sound out in front of you. It's because of the crossfeed, and then the head shadowing. Very big difference between whether you're using left-right phantom for your center information or discrete center channel. And here's the difference. If you're doing phantom,
Yeah.
because of the crossfeed, it's going to introduce this big dip right around 1K. So
Yeah.
completely change your balance in a mix, like your vocal.
Wow.
It'll sound very different, et cetera, et cetera. I'm skipping over this really quickly. You're all AES members, right? So you can get to these papers. They're all in the journal. They're all in the e-library. Anyway, yeah, just to finish up and say how theory and practice really end up coming together. If you're paying attention to both of them, I think this is really
That's your Venn diagram.
where we are.
Yeah.
That's my Venn diagram, yes. So that's the end, and I'll play you that thing, but that's my email address. Please write to me. I will respond. It might not be immediately. If I don't write you in 3-4 days, remind me, bug me. I have no problem. You write a
We
second
could talk
email
to
saying,
you.
I read your last week, then I'll definitely respond.
I'll ask you
But
about those motors.
Very often, oh yeah, talking about the motors. I always mean to reply, and occasionally I reply, and it sits in my, if I don't hit send, it sits in the Outlook in that, virtual wasteland. Very embarrassing. But here's something that we uploaded to Apple and recorded back off again, and this is where we pushed, okay, we cheated a little bit. We put the kick drum in this tune at exactly 63 hertz into the LFE, we cranked it in, and we turned it on and off. There's a little robot voice telling you when it's on and when it's off. And you hear the result of the summing between Apple's filter and the main channels as they're summed together in the binaural.
LFE off. LFE on. LFE off. LFE on.
Wow.
LFE off.
That's very interesting.
LFE on. LFE off. LFE off.
So
That was a hard track.
so the answer is don't use LFE.
1,300 views.
And it's still up there, which means Apple hasn't found us yet.
Wow.
I love it. And you say that he created a label just to be able to submit it through the track just for this, so it's
Yeah,
like a,
so
it's like a research
he's
label.
got a record label and it's Disco Kid, and then a few hours later it pops up on Apple Music, and we can play it back down. So we do a
That's
lot
funny.
of measurements there. We phase invert and flip and stuff, and we can see, you can see with his IR of what Apple's doing. They're adding reverb, right? You know that, and that you could see them. You could see it moving. You could see the reverb. I mean, we hear it, but it's terrible. So I'm going to stop there and back up to this slide.
Well, cheers. Thank you, Richard. It's always nice to have a fellow AES member at these events. So thank you for being here. I know we're approaching time to get out of here, so we're approaching a quick timeline. I know you've come a long way for this, so thank you very much. Are you staying in town? Obviously,
staying
okay,
away.
all right. Well, we'll figure that out, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you again. We'll do this every couple of years. We'll invite you. Thank you everyone for coming. Our next event is April. Chris, would you like to talk about our April month? You are producing the April event.
Yeah, April's event. I'm going to be doing a brief introduction of myself before introducing Quintessence Studio to talk about how sound can feel and interacts with the human body.
Okay, great.
Where is that?
We're not sure yet. To be determined, all that stuff. Jeff.